I had a burgeoning career as a singer, and I was on tour with the guitar player for Pearl Jam. We were in our own separate band, and we were in Brooklyn performing on stage when everything's going fine. And I noticed this man in the front, right in front of me in the audience, who hated the show and made sure I knew it by all his giant body language that was super negative. And he was just being him, whatever. But normally, number one, I don't see that. But even if someone looks bored or just not into it or whatever, you just let it go. If that person's not into it, that's fine. We were not Pearl Jam. And if they came to hear really heavy rock, we weren't that. So I thought that's fine. But it didn't let go of my focus, jammed onto this guy. So while I was performing, remembering lyrics, smiling, cueing with the band, all that, another part of my mind started going down this terrible whirlwind of negative thinking, all about myself. And it started about him, then it went to the band, and then it landed quickly onto me and how bad of a singer I am, and how come I'm even on stage, and uh, I can't remember my lyrics, and it went on the entire show, worse and worse and worse. And I've described it before as like, it's like my consciousness was like sitting around like a radio, tuning it, and there's the channel that's the Let's Hate on Barber channel. And it was a stream, no commercial breaks. And it was just like a stream of negative thoughts. And it was disconcerting. And while I had that part of my brain doing that, the other part of my brain performing, a third part of my brain was like looking at all this from behind me, like a witness conscious. And it was saying, wow, look, you can do all this at the same time. Isn't that fascinating? What an interesting thing to be happening right now. And I was like, get me off this stage. So that night, when I was laying in bed after the show, I started thinking about that. And I asked myself, are these thoughts happening all the time about myself and I'm just not aware of them? I have had therapy. I've done all sorts of things to help myself. I thought I was kind of over all that. To at least a degree. We all have our things, but this was really extreme. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? I can't have this happen again. And I had this great idea. I was going to sign up for one of those camps where you go and you push your boundaries and you develop courage. And I thought that'll just knock them right out. This will be great. So when I got home, I researched and I found this camp, and I signed up. And it was months later that it was starting. And I somehow suckered my best friend into going with me. And it was in a very remote area of Vancouver, BC, Canada. This was before cell phones. This is 2010. So even if there were cell phones, though, we were such in a remote area, it would not have had a signal. That's how remote it was. And we brought our tents and lugged all this stuff. We were going to be there for a week. We signed liability forms that were terrifying, just non-disclosure forms. So I can't, I feel obligated to not express exactly what happened there, but every night there was sleep deprivation. So I slept 3 hours a night. There was extensive lecturing that was repetitive and ongoing while you're tired. I don't think that's a very kind way of helping people gain knowledge. There was every day was like dealing with fire and heights and blindfolds and scary people that threaten you so that you gain resilience and being like attacked on the street or something like that. That, none of us had any clue what we were getting into. They purposely will not tell you. And so when, for instance, a scary man appears and starts attacking you, you're going, WTF, and then you find out you're supposed to be learning something from it. It was not, in my mind, I would not have led a camp like this, let's just say. But I will say every night I was celebrating because I made it through another day and I did a good job and I was gaining courage. And I just felt like in some freaked out way, I was getting stronger. Well, the last day was an endurance exercise out in the sun and carrying heavy things that was timed. You couldn't slow down at all. And I was doing fine. I had a teammate with me until about halfway. And then I started noticing really odd symptoms like really shaky legs, flashes of light, echoey sounds. Sounds did not sound normal anymore. Very started getting more and more and more scary, and like the senses were colliding and just really not acting like normal senses. None of them. This woman I was teamed with said, "Are you all right?" And I kept trying to hide it from her because she was a little timid and things, and I was trying to be strong for both of us. And so instead, I would say, "Yeah, I'm fine." And I drink way more water because I thought I was getting dehydrated. Well, turns out that was not a good idea because I was suffering from two things at once. One was heat stroke from all that sun beating down. The second one was really important for my personal body, and that was hyponatremia, which is when you wash all the sodium out of your blood. So every time I drank more water, I was washing more sodium out. I was sweating all week, so I was washing it out. And like marathoners die of this because of the extreme physical exertion in the sun. Um, so I barely made it to the end, but I did make it back. And that I'll never forget the image I see in my mind's eye as I'm approaching the finishing line, because there were people on either side of the finishing line cheering us on. But they looked like out of a nightmare. They were strobing, the sounds were going da 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 da. There's just scary sounds, flashes of light. I was shaking in my entire body. I was like, I'm gonna faint. So I asked for a medic. I said, tell someone I'm gonna faint. Well, no, they couldn't find anyone. They said, just lay down. Like, that's how helpful these people were. Turns out they did not have a proper medic at this place. The person that did come to help me was so scared when he saw me. And later when my friend found me, she said my skin was gray. I had these vacant eyes with dark circles under them. I couldn't walk by myself anymore. I was really out of it. And the man took, blood pressure and all this stuff, and he was just looking terrified. He did give me electrolytes though, and that contained some salt. So maybe from a physical level, that's what kept me alive. In the long run, I don't know. He said, let's take you back to your tent and have you just lie down. Well, it was too hot to be in my tent, so now I'm laying under a tree with my best friend at my side, just kind of closing her eyes and doing Reiki on me and stuff. And the first thing that started happening was this terrifying sensation of my left leg disappearing from my experience. I couldn't feel it anymore. I couldn't feel weight or volume or heat or anything. And I started kind of screaming. and telling my friend, my leg is gone, my leg is gone. And then my right leg, same thing happened. And then one at a time, each of my arms. So I felt like I was a torso and a head, helpless under this tree. And that, I cannot tell you how frightening that felt. So at that moment, in the midst of this very heightened sense of fear and helplessness, that's the word, this image, this movie started playing that was from, you could call it a memory, but it was not anything like any memory. But it was something that happened 2 weeks earlier when I was rehearsing in a different band with my brother, and he and I had gotten into an argument. And during this movie, it's playing, but, and I'm looking at it as Barbara is looking at it, but I'm also in it at the same time and re-experiencing it. So there was these two levels of perception going at once. My eyes were closed, I think, and it started playing. And unlike a memory that is spotty and has holes in it and is not a fluid image like a movie, this one was, everything was exactly as it had happened and clear as a bell. And at one moment during this argument where I was really silent, he was doing his loud thing and I was doing my silent thing. And I kind of shut down in that moment in the movie, in the memory or whatever. And the movie I was watching freeze framed at that moment. And a voice, a male, neutral, kind, gentle voice I'd never heard before in my head said, "What were you thinking at that moment, at that freeze frame?" And that startled me enough to think about it and quit crying and stuff. And I answered it, and the movie went away. And a new movie kind of slid in off the screen of my perception and started playing from a month earlier. And that one freeze framed at this moment that I looked down. And that at that moment it said, "What were you thinking that made you look down?" And I answered, and it went off. Another one came. I raised my eyebrow. It said, freeze framed. "What were you thinking that made you raise your eyebrow? What does that mean? What did that mean?" And I answered, and this went on, Sabrina, for several hours. All these tiny moments in my adult life, on and on and on, all these relationships where there was a little conflict or there was a moment I was comparing myself to someone else, and I maybe walked into a party or something and thought, "Oh, they're all so successful or beautiful and I'm so whatever I am, at the moment." And it would stop. It was amazing. So it wasn't necessarily moments with every other person. It might have been a moment with my own self, but they were always about my thoughts. A few were about my emotions, but they were always connected to thoughts. This went on, like I said, for several hours. While this was going, and this began right when these movies started, I started feeling the sensation of air puffing out of my head. And I had read enough about spiritual things to know that your life force, when you're dying, leaves the top of your head. And so when I started feeling that, I started feeling a little more nervous that maybe whatever is happening to me is more dangerous than I'm just a rest is going to do. But anyway, that kept going over these hours. And as it was going, I was leaving my body basically and moving in towards death. Now I'm tearing up here because at one moment these movies stopped and the voice that was talking to me said, "Barbara, you have a choice now. Would you like to stay or go?" And I knew that meant, would I like to continue dying, or do I want to come back into my body? And again, why I am tearing up is because at this moment I had one foot in this world, one foot in the other world. And the feeling on the other world is so beyond what we call love that there are not words to describe it. And every time I bring it up, I tear up because I'll never forget that feeling. It's the most beautiful, comforting, welcoming, non-judgmental, non-critical, pure love, um, kindness, every possible thing you could want, all mixed up into one sensation. And it's in the pores of that atmosphere there. And I could feel it in my body. I could feel it, well, not in my body, but in my whole system while I was partially in there. I didn't 100% leave my body. I was at that cusp, and I was leaning towards going because that feeling was so incredible. And I'll tell you, it knocked any fear I have about dying. And I always have to say, not necessarily the fear of dying, like I mean, the movement towards dying where the body's shutting down. That does not sound very fun to me. I've experienced that, and it's not great. But the actual crossover, no fear at all. It's a welcoming, beautiful place. So I was leaning towards that. But there's aspects of life that I enjoy, many aspects. I love eating. I love kissing. I love nature. I love petting dogs. I love hanging out with my good friends. I love stretching in the morning. You know, there's so many beautiful things about being here and about seeing the beautiful aspects of our life here on earth. And what an amazing gift that we have to be here, even though it is freaking hard here so much of the time. So I was playing with these ideas in my head when I had this choice. So I talked with this voice about it, and we had a conversation about whether I wanted to come back or not, and what it would mean, and what would I do here, you know, to make it more pleasurable and joyful for me. At the end of that discussion, which maybe we'll touch on later, I um I said I would like to go back to Earth, my body. And the voice said, okay, then you need to do something. You, for the very first week you get back, you need to contact these 4 people. And you need to tell them, 2 of them I had to tell them, how much I loved them. This is not a kind of thing that you say, you know, I know you already know I love you, but I just want to reiterate. It was not like that. It was like, we're going deep, sister. We're going to say why you love that person. What has their presence meant to you in your life? What have you learned from them? What do you admire most about them? And I mean the deep stuff. And I needed to do that with 2 people. Another person, I also needed to apologize for something. Another person, I needed to really, truly, deeply express gratitude in the same way, this depth of gratitude, what it meant to me, what this person had done for me. And the last person, I was supposed to just call on the phone every single week, even if for a couple minutes, to start rebuilding a connection. And I'll tell you, Sabrina, that connection grew so fast and so profoundly into such an amazing, beautiful connection again after years of being separated. It was really, really nice. So I said I'd do that. The moment I said that, I felt that puffy feeling of the life force leaving. It re-entered. It would change direction, started going back into me. I could feel it. And then one at a time, all my limbs came back. And after literally just a few minutes, I opened my eyes. Now the sun had gone down, and it was this golden, amazing hue everywhere. And the grass color, and this giant bumblebee buzzing around a flower, and my friend's hair, and her face with her eyes closed, praying for me. This place is amazing. And I know it's hard. I know it. And I will tell you that I've heard at least three different near-death experiencers say that when they fully crossed over, they saw a line of souls lined up to get here, because this is the place everyone wants to be. This is the place that you go when you are ready to really do your hardcore work so you can do some massive ascending. So anyone who's watching this, give yourself a massive pat on the back for even agreeing to come here, or not agreeing, you wanted to come here. You wanted to deal with whatever it was to grow astronomically as a soul. And some people say, and I tend to agree with them, what's happening right now is so bizarre, vast. I'm sensing an awakening coming. The people that are here now have got the freaking lottery ticket. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm not saying it has been easy. But as far as one of the most tremendous times I can ever imagine being alive, it would be now. And so when I opened my eyes, I was seeing the world in a way that I hadn't since probably a child. These eyes of wonderment, and everything seemed just sizzling with extraordinariness. This place is really weird when we stop just noticing it as if it's always there. But really, every morning we awaken from a mini death, and you can open your eyes and look at your room and start going, wow, that plant, what is a plant? Does it have consciousness? Does it, just get into something so slowly that it suddenly has magic and wonderment again. So I was that way for a month, where everything was new. It was a serious rebirth feeling it was like being a baby, but the adult consciousness. And best of all, I didn't have my negative thoughts anymore. Not that self-doubt, not that self-criticism. More importantly, even for me, was worry. I worried all the freaking time. That was gone for a month. I was smelling flowers all the time. I was speaking really authentically and honestly with the people, and lovingly. I was appreciating people and everything, food and music I heard in my whole body. It was incredible. And then after about a month, it started to fade, because I started going back into what all of us do, walking around as humans, acting like this is normal. This is not a normal thing. And so I started eating food more quickly, listening to music in the background, just doing normal things, getting annoyed with people, old resentments coming up, and then all the old negative thoughts started coming. All the worries, the self-doubt, the self-criticism, judgment, all of that stuff. And I was PO'd. I was really upset, because I thought, I went to this hardcore count. I've done my therapy and I had a near-death experience, and still I'm going to have this crap. This is so not right. But it's really good I had that moment, because I sat at that moment and I said, what was that? What I now know to be a life review, those movies, was my version of a life review. I said, what was that life review about? Why did it keep asking you about my thoughts? And it dawned on me, okay, the message they were specifically showing me was about the DOS, and specifically negative thoughts about myself and others. And what was that showing me? Well, that answer has developed over the years. And what it first showed me was time to start studying thoughts. What are they? Where do they come from? What are negative emotions? What's depression? What's anxiety? I was on antidepressants. I mean, what is this dip that happens to my mood sometimes? What the hell is that? So I stopped pretty much everything in my life, and I went into 3 strong years of my own research into neuroscience and cellular biology and spiritual aspects of thought and all this stuff. I was experimenting on myself to see what would start changing my own thoughts. And what I discovered, Sabrina, was there are two kinds of negative thinking. There's one type where it comes into your head, the negative thought comes in, and you go, ah, and then it goes away. It doesn't stick with you. And then there's the other kind, I call them negative mind loops, because they go in the mind and then they sit there and loop. And you can't freaking get them out of your head like a bad song. But they are the worries. They are the, I'm such an idiot. They are the, I'm too old. My body looks like crap. Or I have no control over eating or drinking. And, that person doesn't love me. Or I should never get into a relationship because there's no good partners left. And they're just going to break my heart. All that crap that just flings its arrows in our head, and we can't get out of these loops. And what happens when we get into a mind loop, like a hamster on a wheel, and we can't get off, that thought will trigger an emotion like anger, fear, envy, self-doubt, all that. And then we're feeling like crap. Now, those emotions are stuck in us unless we do something about it. And then guess what? The thought leads to the emotion, leads to behaviors and habits and identity. Now we are the person that is always unlucky, always has money problems, always is low energy, always is overweight, because that's feeding itself constantly into our entire psyche. And so I realized what I wanted to do was figure out a way to interrupt the loops. So it's just a normal negative thought that I hear, and it can go on its way. And that's what I worked on over those 3 years until I came up with a way that really worked for me. And I call it the dlooping method, because we're undoing that loop. As I interrupted these loops, my life started dramatically changing, to the point where people were like, what are you doing? Like, I remember one woman, this was, I don't know, maybe 8 years though, after my near-death experience. It took me a while to figure this out and then work on myself. And then for her to actually say, you don't even look or sound anything like the person you were when I met you, which was in 2010. And the thing is, my health improved. How I look is very different. My money changed dramatically. And I noticed with money, I was always struggling with money. And I noticed once I started changing these loops about money, this total windfall came into my life from, it was a gift from, well, it wasn't really a gift. It was a relative in another country I hardly knew who died, and she didn't have a will. So I got like $18,000. And I was like, what? This is so bizarre. And once that happened, that was proof in the outer world that I can be abundant. And so I noticed with money, it really helps to have that first thing that changes something. So that maybe it's true with all of our negative thinking, but I noticed it with money and with people I've taught this to. Once they have that first click where it's like the lid gets lifted, then they can start really attracting money. And so my abundance with money has gone up every year, just bizarrely. So that was another one. Relationships, amazing transformations there. That's probably the most obvious because I wasn't resenting as much. I was able to forgive. I was able to see my part in situations more. I was caretaking at that time. I learned to stop caretaking and enmeshing myself in other people's lives. It just became clean so that everyone could just come up and be themselves and be loved for whatever level we can love each other and however we can love ourselves is what kind of comes down to. So there were two times during this period when I remember laying in bed so joyful, Sabrina. I mean, again, it makes me tear up. Like the level of joy. By the way, I was off antidepressants, I think a year and a half after my near-death experience because I was dlooping. Nothing against antidepressants when you need them. 100% helped me, but I didn't want to be on them for the rest of my life. So I'm very happy I'm not. But I remember I'm off antidepressants for several years. I'm laying in bed and I thought, I've never been this happy before. What is this? Like, is this normal? Do people get happy like this? This level of happy? I didn't think it was literally possible for that to exist. And then probably about a year and a half later, the same thing happened. So I was here originally. That first time lying in bed, I was up here. The next time I was even higher. And I thought, oh my gosh, maybe there is no limit to how happy a person can be, just how happy I personally can be. And I don't know, it's like life can be really, really joyful. So, that's my near-death experience, and I'll talk a little later about how my interpretation has also expanded since that time. But I wrote a book about it because people kept asking me, what did you do? What did you do? And I started telling them, and then their lives were changing. So I wrote a book called How to Stop Negative Thoughts. And then at least the first phase of the full de-looping system is in there, and it really makes a difference.
That's, I think, exactly what we all need, right? It should be required reading for all of us because I think definitely with your background as an artist, I think creative people and artists in general, they're a bit more subjected to scrutiny, right? And to feedback. And it can also make or break your career. So it also makes sense that you pay attention to that feedback. But as we know with so many artists before us, it can also cripple you. We have examples of designers, of singers, so many artists, painters, that all of a sudden this pressure of what will they think, will they understand, why don't they like it, it becomes unbearable. And I think to a lesser extent, that's a performance anxiety that we all feel in our lives, regardless of what our jobs are. We're always wondering, are we pretty enough? I think that's specifically for women. Are we smart enough? Are we good enough? Do we deserve this? And when you talk about this process of thought, that's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You maybe make a mistake and you say, oh, I'm such an idiot. And then the belief that I'm such an idiot will make you make more mistakes, which in turn just reinforces the belief that I am an idiot. So it becomes your identity, and you start operating from, oh, be careful with me because I'm not that smart, like I've done all of those things. So it would be
100%.
it would be amazing if you could talk more about how you were able to work with those thoughts, the thoughts of lack, the thoughts of not being enough, the thoughts of will they like me in terms of relationships, but also in terms of your music, your art. How did you manage to change this?
Yeah, so the very first step is noticing the thoughts. And this is easier than, or it's harder than it sounds. And so I would do things like because the deal is if we don't even know what these thoughts were, like when I was on stage that time and there were all these thoughts coming, so I was like, I didn't even know they were there. They were unconscious. And if we're not making them conscious, we can't do anything about them. So this process is I mean, we can't. This is 100% the first step. So what I would do is, for instance, I had a little note by the side of my bed. So every time I woke up, that was the first thing I saw, and it said, "What is my first thought today, waking up?" And it's amazing what you might find. It's like, oh no, I have to go to that stupid job or whatever. I have this dumb thing I have to do, or it could be anything, or just like, I slept so badly. Just, what a way to start a day. So that was one. Another one is I put alerts on my phone that would just ding go off and it would say, what were you thinking right then? And what was I just thinking about? I also noticed whenever I was feeling a little off, sometimes we can't, one of the steps is deciphering what we're even with the emotion we're feeling, but we may just feel a little uncomfortable and we don't know why. But to catch those, because you can kind of feel sick in your stomach or get a headache suddenly, or just feel off. And those are always clues that a thought has happened and it is now affecting the body with emotions or sensations. So then I'd say, oh, what was I just thinking about? Oh, that report that I've been procrastinating on. Okay, what was my thought? And I started writing them down. And certain thoughts happen so many times a day. So I started putting little notes by each time. Oh, there's that thought again. And I'd note it. So I kind of see which ones are really going nuts in my head. Starting to get just the landscape of my mind. So that was the first step. The second step with the dlooping method is there was something, hold on, there was something else I wanted to say. Oh, here's an example, a specific example. After I got that landscape of what I could kind of decipher going on, even if someone does that for a week and they really start getting a clue of what's happening in their mind, then they can start picking out specific things they want to work on. Like, let's say they're noticing a lot of those fears are about how they look. Let's say they don't, they feel like their body doesn't look good enough and summer's coming. Or they're about to start dating someone and they want to look really good. And that person has a great body. Now they're comparing theirs, it's like the mind goes crazy, right? So they can say, I'm going to work this week on catching every thought where I'm comparing my body to someone else, or my appearance, or my smartness, or whatever you want it to be. And as you go through your day, if you make that intention, start noticing your thoughts. And there it is again. Oh, and then you do the de-looping process. So the first one is you notice it. The second step is detaching from it. Because when we think, oh, I'm unattractive, let's say. I am, it's a very powerful statement. I am unattractive. Now, unattractive is part of my identity. I am this. So when you um, detach from the word, you are saying, you give it a name. And this sounds really dumb and simple, but UCLA did a study on this. This is amazing with the effects it has on the amygdala part of your brain, the stress part. You just name it. You say, oh, that's a mind loop I just did. Oh, there's that comparison phrase again. That is my old way of thinking, not my new way of thinking. These are just ways of naming it as something else than you. So now the thought is, I have unattractiveness, or even the thought is, I am unattractive, but it's not you anymore. This is a mind loop. It's sitting right here. It's outside of me now. So now I'm detached from it. And I can see it for what it is, which is a random freaking thought that's based on years of programming from my childhood. It's not who you are. And you start figuring that out when you detach from it. You're like, wait a minute, it doesn't happen overnight. You have to do this every day. But it starts rewiring your brain. And you're like, that's not true even, actually. And it's just amazing what happens. And then the third step is detour. So you've made a little opening now in your mind where I am unattractive used to be. You've jumped off that thought. You've detached from it. There's this hole that wants to be filled up with something. This thought's going to jump right back in if you're not careful. So what you do is you plug up that hole with something else to occupy your mind. It can be an affirmation, it can be breathing, it can be playing ping pong, it can be listening to a positive podcast. I used to skip in the neighborhood like a little kid. I used to do that. It always made me laugh. Whatever it is, petting dogs helps. Just something else that takes your mind off this God that's not helping you. So that's the very first three steps, and they go really hand in hand. You do them one after another as like a little clump. And if you even stop there, you feel better so fast. It's crazy. In a day or a week or whatever, you're going to feel this real lift in your energy. And then the fourth step takes longer, but this is where you get in there and you start really transforming these old programmings. And that's called de-story. So you're taking the story out of the thought. And so you might look at the I am unattractive thing and you dive in there and you're like, is that really true? Am I unattractive? What does that mean? Where did I get that? How am I not unattractive? Like, how is that untrue? And you start looking at all the angles of this thought. And suddenly it starts just not having the power it had. It starts looking like a belief that's just a thought that's been said over and over and over and over, but it's not even real. It's not truth. So that's the first four steps. That's the stuff in the book. And then the second phase is about removing the negative emotions stuck in the body. And then the third phase is about actually thinking, well, what do you want? Instead of removing all this stuff you don't want, what do you want? And that's when you can start consciously creating a new experience of your life.
I love that. And I think so often one of the things that changed my life absolutely was when I understood that my thoughts are not myself and they're not necessarily true. And when I detached, as you were saying, the thought from me, it became, oh, I am having a thought and not I am unattractive. So it was such a change. But when I noticed those things go by, and I still do have them, but it's much easier to detach and to see it as, oh, this is just my brain repeating something that I've been saying for so long. And my brain wants to keep me safe. And my brain also wants to save energy and to just repeat the things that we've been saying for 35 years. So,
Yes.
of course, if that's been on my mind every day for 35 years, it it's a loop that keeps going.
Yes.
So just being able to detach from it is just, yeah, life-changing.
It
And
is. And I don't know how much research you or your audience has done on the way on negative thinking, but the statistics, the people that have studied this, they say we have on average, the average person has about 60,000 thoughts every day, and which is a ton of thoughts, and 90% are repetitive. 90% are basically loops or repeating of things. Sure, we need to remember some things, but you can imagine how many of those repetitive thoughts are not helping us. And then the last bit of the statistics was out of those 60,000 thoughts, 90% of which are repetitive, 70% are negative. And we wonder why people are on antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds. God, I wonder why. Our brains are just haywire. And it's like, it's really sad that we're taught algebra in school, which I don't even know what the hell that was anymore. I've never used it in my life once. But we're not taught how to use our minds in a way that help us, because the mind's going to work. The mind's just going to do its thing. And they are problem solvers, and they're trying to protect us, and they're doing all this stuff. But they go off the rails if they're not given a little bit of guidance. And it's not even that hard, but it's after years of not working on it. It's like someone that's never gotten out of a chair. You think they're going to be able to walk? No, they don't have any muscle strength, right? And so for like 35, 45, 50, whatever years old, and we've not worked on these loops, it takes a little while, but it doesn't mean it can't change. It can change really quickly.
absolutely. And what I wanted to get deeper into, Barbara, is when you chose to come back on Earth, you were given this assignment to call a few people and tell them you love them and why, and the difference that they've made in your life, as well as apologizing and a few other calls. Why were you given this assignment?
I mean, I don't know 100%, but I sure have some strong guesses. One of the I said when I was debating if I wanted to stay or go was I felt like I had some unfinished business here with people. I didn't want to die and leave some detritus behind us, like a mess behind me. So I wanted to clean up my side of the street. I already made that clear with this guide. The other thing was, you know, the funny part about that conversation, it's funny now, it wasn't at the time, but because it was such a strong like dose of humility. But I said, well, I'm not sure if I want to. I don't think I want to go back to my life. I think I'd rather keep going out of this realm. But what about all my unfinished projects? I had a couple albums half done and screenplays that aren't made into movies and writing that's never been published and all this stuff. And this guide was so sweet and kind, but honestly, it said, "Oh, Barbara, those really don't matter that much." And I was crestfallen. I was like, "What do you mean? My music doesn't matter?" But it was saying that what matters on this earth are your relationships and how you show up. And again, it makes me tear up because it's so beautiful. The whole piece is about, am I going to show up with love? Am I going to leave a conversation that was difficult with as much respect as I can possibly muster for that other person who's probably 100% doing their best, even if it doesn't feel like it? But they have their crappy programming just like I have my crappy programming. And when I walk into a room, am I going to bring my bad mood with me to hang out with these people and complain and shit all over everybody with my problems? Or am I going to just do my best in the moment? And sure, I can go off with a friend and talk about things and work through things, which I always do, or often do. But I'm not going to just go in and complain and gossip and find the worst in everybody and the worst in myself and should all over myself, should this, should that. So it's just noticing how am I acting with other people and how am I acting with myself? Where is the love here? And a lot of this stuff going on in the world these days with really badly with politics. I've never seen anything like this in my life. These factions of hatred that are going on and blame and self-righteousness, that is the exact opposite of what I was being taught. And I would say 98% of NDEs are taught. It seems to be the message is always about love. And so with these political things going on, I just can say everyone's doing the best they can. And all I can do is the best I can. And I'm not going to fall into the dark hole of hating and arguing. Anyway, that's off the topic. The main thing is this place it's about relationships. And so if the voice said, if your music connects you more deeply with yourself or connects someone else with their selves or with another friend of theirs, and the music they share, they listen to your music and they feel some connection with each other because of your music or your lyrics really said, oh, I feel heard because she's saying exactly what I'm feeling. Then it totally matters. But if it has to do with ego or self-worth or like trying to be special or anything like that, then it's like, yeah, okay, you be you. You can leave it behind. It's not that big a deal. But what mattered was your relationship. So my guess is I was to come back and really start working on the relationship aspect. And these were, of course, my closest people, my family, and really close people.
I think that's a lesson that many of us need to hear, because very often I think the people around us are exactly the relationships that we take for granted.
Yes.
We never, when you said you had to say exactly why you were grateful or exactly, why you loved that person and why they meant so much to you, it struck me that so often we know why somebody means a lot to us, but we almost never say it, do we? Even in a marriage, you can say love you, bye, or love you, you so home, but there's never, this deep appreciation of, hey, you always take care of this for me. I really appreciate you for doing that. And it's that mindful moment where you're really connecting instead of just saying mindlessly, love you, bye, because we've gotten into that routine, right?
Yes. And you can only imagine what it's like for, when you're like this, an example you said, for that husband to hear that being said to him, like this small thing he might do just because he does it, but to have him hear that from his spouse, that it means that much to her or him, that it really, really changes the connection between people. And the healing that happened from those conversations is so remarkable. And two of the people were my parents, and they died recently. I still feel so much loss there, but I'm so grateful I had the opportunity to say how much they meant, because eventually our parents are going to die, and all sorts of people are going to die, and we're going to die. So it's really important to get these things said. I mean, I have several friends where their parents are dying, and I've mentioned this, and I just so wish I could just like shoo them out the door and go. It's like, go tell your mom or dad this, but it's really awkward, and I think it's hard for people to actually do it. And I will say that the three conversations I had with people in person were bizarre, because we do not go this deep. And I was crying and telling them I was freaked out near death experience, and they didn't know what to think about that either. But none of them could look at me while I was telling them how much I love them or how much I felt sorry, apologizing, because the depth of emotion is really hard for us all, or I don't know about all, but many of us to handle. It's real good practice, though.
Yeah, we're so not used to it. So even if somebody comes and opens up to you, it's very difficult to accept that.
Yes, that too. That's a whole nother thing. Learning to accept and not give, but to accept as well.
Exactly. Yeah. It almost ties in, I think, with the negative thinking, right? That if we are ourselves in that negative loop, so imagine you're saying, I'm unattractive, and that's your identity. If somebody says you look so beautiful, would you believe that? Because your identity is you're not attractive.
Yes.
So either they're seeing wrong or they're just lying to you.
Right. And then our mind says, oh, liar, instead of accepting. And actually, I just want to say something that I thought was so profound. Since this near-death experience, I mean, ever since then, connections with the other side have gotten more and more easy and strong, to the point where it's pretty much all the time now. I have guides and my parents now, deceased people I can talk to. And one of the things that came up once a few years ago, I was really working on my ability to accept, like you said, to receive. And this guide said, when you don't receive, let's say a friend gives me a compliment and I don't believe it, or I don't accept it, or a gift or anything. And I said, oh, no, and, no, that was nothing, whatever. Or, no, you can't buy my dinner tonight. No, let me pay for myself. Whatever this is, or where we push away the gift someone's trying to give us, that creates scar tissue in the givers. The giver is trying to give me something, and when I push it away, that creates scar tissue in there. I'm like, well, I don't want that. So I have been really working hard. Well, I don't have too much problem receiving anymore. But it took me years. That was my thing. That was one of my things. So I delooped it, and then when I heard that, I'm like, thank you. I'll just say thank you so.
Absolutely. It's so beautiful, and it reminded me of this time when I was, I think, in school or in university, and I would tutor kids, and sometimes I would visit my grandmas who lived close by, close
Oh,
to one of my students. And I mean, of course, like with retired people, sometimes, what they earn is not too much. But whenever I would visit, they would want to give me just a few dollars to go out or get something nice. And I mean, I was quite comfortable with money. And it always seemed like taking from somebody that doesn't have a lot, because I knew they weren't earning a lot as retired people. So I always said, but like, I do have money. I can afford to go out, have, I don't know what I would buy at that time, but I was always refusing it until one day my dad said, "You're literally taking their joy and pleasure away."
yes.
I was thinking I was doing the right thing by leaving the person that needs the money more with that. And I mean, it was not a lot of money, maybe $5. But instead, they had this joy that they wanted to contribute to my life, to the person that they loved. And I was rejecting that.
Yeah.
And from the moment I understood that it's that allowing that, taking it and being grateful, and then maybe the next time saying, "Oh, I've seen this beautiful headband and I bought it with the money that you gave me, so thank you for that." That just made them feel so good. And it's probably one of the best things they could do with their money because they used it to provide joy to somebody they loved.
Isn't that beautiful? That is such a good example. Absolutely. I hate it when people don't give the gift, take the gift I'm giving them. It feels horrible.
Exactly. Now, what I wanted to end on was you mentioned earlier we're very lucky to be here at this time, and there's a big shift happening. It's a big awakening, and I've heard these messages before. I also know that if we are to open any newspaper or TV show right now, it would be telling us about, you mentioned it earlier, politically, we're all at odds with each other. Geographically, it seems as well. So it almost seems like we're all being pitted against each other. And very often you could feel like it's the hardest time we've had to live through as humanity. So, could you tell me more about why you think now is such an amazing opportunity to be alive and to be on Earth?
Yeah, now I will preface this by saying I don't have like insights and predictions the way other people do. I don't know what the hell's going on. I can I do have some information from some guides, but I can say from at least a few aspects. One is I have never seen so many people becoming conscious and at least being curious about what is going on spiritually, for instance. Never in my life have I seen something like this before, where people who have seemed very close minded are now open and ask questions or come up with things I never thought they would say about just just being open to things. And I think that's the first sign that something is opening, because if we have these closed down beliefs about what this reality is and what we're doing here, there's nowhere for any new positive information to even go. But this is telling me minds are opening. There's a little gap for some things, some light to get into all of our heads. Anyone who's opening up and at least curious about it. So that's one thing I've noticed. I mean, I've never seen so many NDE, for instance, interviews in all my life. It just took off exponentially in this, like the last year, it seems like. Um, Another thing I'm noticing is, when old systems or like an angry person or whatever, when they start losing power, they go nuts because they're being backed into a wall. It's like an angry dog. If you if you back him into the wall, he's gonna go nuts and bark and probably bite. And I feel like the systems that have been controlling and in power are going crazy. And that's frightening. And it's also a sign that they're on their way out to me. And I'm not saying they're just going to be like going away and everything's going to be great. They're probably going to put up the fight of their life because they're getting backed into a wall. And so it may not be very smooth, but I feel like that's what happens when things are dying. The, this interest in, there's a lot of different ways of dealing with what I call mind loops now. And a lot of people are working on their minds. And it has to start with ourselves. Any political problems out there have to start with how we treat ourselves. I'm going to, if I'm treating myself with really fearful, angry, harsh comments in my own mind, it's probably going to come out into the world too. And so if I want kindness in the world, I need to start in my own mind, with my own self, and my small group of people. And that is exponentially going to start altering the people around me. And then it'll be like that ripple effect where people will start being kinder to each other in general. That's how I see this spreading like a really positive virus. And speaking of a virus that we won't name, when that started happening a few years ago, I asked one of the guides, um, what is this about? It was in the midst of everything being closed down. And I don't even know if I'm supposed to be talking about this, but whatever. I was told that that was a really loud tap on the shoulder for people to open their hearts. And so as soon as I understood that, it's kind of like the opening of the mind thing. I just started gently softening this hard crust around the heart, this hard, scared, protective crust. And so I've led meditations before where I've suggested for people, and maybe someone watching this might want to try it, where you just close your eyes, tune into your heart area, and imagine it like a cube of butter that's been in the freezer. And you put a little bit of sunshine on it and let it just soften. Just let it just gently start softening. Just opening that area up that's just protecting itself. And we are really, there's so much goodness around, there's so much love waiting to fill that area. But it takes trust, takes faith, it takes practice. And I have a feeling as people do all these things, something really remarkable is going to happen. And what it is, I won't even put words to it because I don't even know if a human mind will understand. We'll have to just see.
So beautiful. Barbara, tell me, how can people connect with you and with your work?
So my website is called howtostopnegativethougts.com, which is also the title of my book, How to Stop Negative Thoughts. And I have another website, barbaraireland.com, which has two little doors. One goes into the Mind Loops work, which is the website I just gave, and the other one goes into music, at least the jazz music. I'm doing other kinds of music now again. So those are the ways. And just to let people know, I'm starting a really fun group. I don't know when this is coming out, but the group is starting May 15th of 2024. And it's showing the connection between clutter in your environment and clutter in your mind. And a lot of studies have been done about how clutter raises your cortisol, which raises depression, anxiety, health problems, and clutter can cause abundance issues, relationship issues, all sorts of amazing stuff about this connection between the two. So it's a declutter, deloop group, and it's super cheap. It's going to be so affordable. We're giving live events, and it's going to be really fun. And I've done this before, and people showed crazy photos of their trucks loaded with stuff that are being like donated and thrown away, and all these magical things that started happening in their lives, and synchronicities and things, because they were making room for wisdom and abundance and love and other things to come in instead of the things that were pulling their energy down. So if people want to join that, I'll have information very soon on my website.
They started completely on accident, and I didn't know what out of body was. I had no reference point. The internet, I don't think really it existed, but I didn't have it. So I didn't have that to access to try to figure anything out. And so it also happened while I was asleep. So to me, I just thought it was a really crazy dream. And that lasted for a while. I'm not sure exactly when I figured out, like, oh, those weren't dreams at all. But the first time I accidentally went out of body, I was just standing by my bed in my room, looking around and thinking, this is a really vivid dream. It's very realistic, and I just feel exactly like when I'm awake, but even more awake than awake. And this is even more detailed almost than reality. And it's a really confusing state to be in. And then I looked down at my bed and noticed my body was there. And that kind of freaked me out. I was like, what kind of a dream is this? I'm seeing my own body. And I didn't have any fear of like whether or not I was dead or anything. I just thought this is just so strange. And then I thought, well, if that's my body, what am I? And I looked down at myself, and I actually saw what I later learned was our chakra system. I saw a string of glowing lights, and they were rainbow colored. And I thought, that's really weird. What is this? And then I thought, well, can I move if I don't have a body? And I imagined moving, and that sent me moving, but moving just by imagining it was so different that I then just started spinning out of control, because I was like, well, where am I going? And what is this? I sort of lost control of that experience, and woke up and thought, wow, that was the weirdest dream. And I have a lot of very intense dreams my whole life. So this was the weirdest dream I had up to that point, I thought. Now I look back, and it's really easy to see that that was my first recognizable, conscious, out-of-body experience. Shortly after, I started having some pretty amazing experiences as well that were life-changing. And obviously that one was in a way too. But I've had, journeys that go far, far beyond the earth even, and they're very similar, and they're also out-of-body experiences. So I don't know if you want me to jump into that.
For sure, but I was a bit curious. Did you want to explore that further? So after that experience, were you sort of interested, oh, could I do that again? Or what else could I do? So was it
Definitely.
accidental, or was there also an intentional part to it?
It was accidental. There was definitely a large part of me that was very fascinated by it, interested in it, wanted to experience it again. But I also had a lot of trauma growing up. I was in a lot of trauma at that moment. Life was very stressful to me. I was maybe, when that happened, maybe 12 or 13, I want to say. And just a lot was going on. My father had died when I was 11. We were very poor growing up, and a lot of chaos. And I, had a lot of also poor choices I was making in life because of all of that. So I was getting in with, the wrong crowds, so to speak. And I was using drugs at an early age. And so a lot of these experiences happened to me and were kind of calling me back to my true heart and my true self. And I think keeping me on a higher path. And at the same time, I was going through this trauma and this self-destruction and this depression and this anxiety and all of these things. So it was very distracting, to say the least. It's very hard to just focus on that aspect of being when all the other things are going on as well. So that was my experience, at least. It wasn't something I was able to really give, I think, the attention it deserved, but it didn't go away. That didn't make it stop. It kept going, but I wasn't able to really, it would have been interesting to see what would have happened if I could have explored it even more intentionally. And at the same time, I'm very glad that I went through what I did and learned what I did about myself and developed the skills to be resilient and to thrive in life. I'm very grateful for that. So I don't know that I would have changed anything either.
Yeah, I definitely think that once we get through the challenges, right, we sort of understand why I don't know that they always give us an edge, but we sort of understand why they were in our path and why they were on our way. And we sort of cannot imagine being the person we are today without having gone through those difficulties, right?
Right. And if you would have told me back then who I would be today, I'd be like, that's not me. That's not a person I recognize, right? That's not a person who carries all this pain I feel, right? And all this torture I seem to go through. And it's also interesting that even when I go through struggles today, sometimes I get lost in that why me, or why is this happening, or how do I make it end, or why is it so hard? And I can look back at that time and see that same feeling, right? And go like, but it ended, right? Or it passed. And it actually wasn't as horrible as I imagined in the moment it could be, or, the suffering didn't last as long as I worried it might. And all of these things are true. And so I can bring those to bear today and say, I know this is hard. I know I'm going to get through it. I know that things are going to get better than ever, actually, once I do go through it. And that it's probably not going to be as hard or long as I imagine it might be.
Those are such wise words. And when you go through the why me phase, how do you deal with that?
I part of it is, like you said, like I look back and I see the other times I've suffered and I see how they've actually given me some sort of gem or tool or ability or understanding of self, or how they've empowered me or given me what I can then share with others to help them as well. And that also there's always an aspect that I've come to just see as purifying, right? In all of the suffering, where when I come out the other side, I really am better than ever. And it's because I've let go of something that I used to identify with or just hold on to or misunderstood about the world or myself. And so that's huge, actually. If we have to suffer a little bit to let go of some of that darkness and to no longer carry it around with us, that's just the death throes, right? Or maybe the birth pangs of what we're transforming into. And so I try to remind myself of that when I go through struggles now. Like, again, this is temporary. It's going to pass. It's not going to be as bad as you fear it might be in the middle of it here. And also, you're going to transform. You're going to purify. You're going to release even more. And so, again, when you come out on the other side there, you really are better than ever. It's better and better and better each time, actually. So I try to remember all of those things. It helps a bit.
So going back to the out of bodies, tell me about the times where you were able to travel outside of the world. What was that like?
It's really beyond description. And I've told this story so many times, so I have words for it now for most of it, but really I can't ever capture it because, again, being out of body for me, at least, and I think I've heard a lot of people describe it this way, it feels more real than this does, right? And that's hard to even describe or explain because this feels the most real we usually feel compared to sleeping or other states of consciousness. But that feels more real. It feels like, oh, this is actually who I really am, or this is what I really am. This is where I actually am from or where I belong. And so that's in itself nearly indescribable. In this specific experience I had, that really changed everything for me. Like many of my experiences over time, but this was maybe one of the first most profound experiences of my life. I, again, was out of body, but I seemed to be in a ship, and I seemed to be with some that I've now understand, and I call them my spiritual guides and allies. At the time, I was just somebody, some people are behind me, and I knew they were of a different quality than anyone I knew, right? Like I knew there was like a higher or stronger or more pure sort of like energy around them. But again, I didn't really have words for this, or I didn't really think of things in those terms. So I didn't know how to describe this. But they were with me, and I remembered at the moment thinking like, oh, I'm always with them. So clearly I had had other experiences that I don't have conscious recall of, because that was familiar to me already. So we were traveling in a ship, and the ship doesn't actually seem like a ship to me. It seems like a construct of a ship that makes it more helpful for my mind to accept what's happening. It seems like we're actually just able to move anywhere we want and do anything we want, but for whatever reason, they kind of constructed this ship idea for us to float around in outside of the Earth, through the solar system and beyond, so that I could accept it more and understand it more, or something, right? I really don't. People have asked me again and again, like, but couldn't it have been a real ship and those were extraterrestrials? And I really don't think that's what was going on. I really think this is an astral, out of body experience, and there's nothing physical about it really, but it does reflect reality, because as we're going, I'm seeing there's the sun, there's the Earth from afar, here's the moon, there's Mars, there's Saturn. These are things I recognize. And as we're going further and further, we're leaving the solar system. And I'm like, wow, this is exciting, right? I'm a very curious person. I'm very into like science, and I was very into the universe and galaxies. And even then, I think it's interesting that I don't think many people at that time had really seen, or maybe we didn't even really have them, but like Hubble telescope images of nebula and galaxies and these things, I at least had not ever been immersed in, right? I had understood that they existed and maybe saw some drawings in some science textbooks or something, but not really much. And as we're going, I'm seeing what I later would see in pictures and in videos, and understand that this is actually what people think is going on out there. And I didn't know that at the time, but in the moment, as I'm going through this ship, leaving our solar system, seeing space and seeing all these galaxies, I'm like lost in the beauty of it. I was like, wow, what is all of this? Just sparkly, glowing dust and like flowing things and swirling galaxies, and the immensity of it, as well as beyond what I can describe, like how many galaxies we went by and how many nebula or stars, or just, it was pretty intense. And then we started kind of going faster and faster, and like, yeah, well, you've seen all that, now let's like get where we're going. And we got to like the farthest distance, and they were clearly like, look over there. And I look, and there's all of the galaxies and stuff we had seen, and then they kind of came into a point of this massive cluster of intense light. And if we could ever quantify it, it's uncountable suns and stars, and brighter than we can imagine, brighter than any of the suns and stars we had flown past on the way there, and so many of them. And this is the center. It's the center of everything. I mean, on one side is everything we had come through, and on another side, there's like an equal opposite mirror image of that. And then it looks to me like a figure 8 coming out from this center of intense light. And I'm just like pressed up against the walls of the ship that are apparently transparent, and just like looking in awe. I don't think I moved or talked, but I was just staring at it because it was so beautiful. And I remember feeling like, again, like that's actually home. Like that's actually where I'm from, or we're from, where everybody's from. Like this is God. This is the center of all things, is what I've come to call it, because it was the center of all things. So we have this figure 8 sort of hourglass shape on one side, and this figure 8 sort of hourglass shape on the other, and the center of all things. And I don't know how long I just stared, and they just let me just stare and just take it in. And I didn't ask any questions. You know, I would kind of point at things and be like, wow, look at that. Oh, look at that. Like they had never seen it or something. Like, wow, isn't this cool? And eventually they were like, okay, you know, and I remember them saying, when I was like, this is where I'm from, or this is the center, like this is God and this is heaven, they were like, yes, this is where you're from. But there's where you are. Like, there's where you are now. And we looked all the way down to like the end of one of the figure eight sides, one of the hourglass halves, and way like out towards the very end of the bottom of the curving, like far as you can get. They're like, that's where you are. That's where you're from now. I was like, wow. And they're like, and now we'll go back. And we just went back. Like, we had taken all the time to move out there, taken all the time to look at all the things. That was really just for my benefit, because we went back in an instant. We really like took maybe the equivalent of what I would conceive of as seconds. And then we were here and we were looking back at the earth. And I was like, wow, all of this is so beautiful. It's so cool. Like, I really don't want to leave here. I really don't want to go back, actually. But they're like, well, we have to go back. And here's where we're going to go back through. And the earth they showed me was actually covered. And this is like a layer over the earth. And this is on a spiritual or other dimensional level. And it looked to me like an infinite amount of spinning tornadoes if you were looking at them from the top down, and they were touching edge to edge. So there's no space that isn't a spinning vortex, basically. And there's so many of them. And I was like, and they're like, which one do you want to go in? And I'm like, I don't know. Why would I know? What do you mean? Which one? What are they? Like, and they're explained like these are different timelines, or they're different lives. Then you live all of them. You can live any of them. Which one would you like to experience? And I was like, that's an overwhelming choice. If there's this many of them, how would I know? And I was like, can you help me choose? Do you know things about these different lives? And they were like, yeah. What would you like? And I said, I would like to go into life that is the best for me and for everyone else. And I meant everyone, like the planet. And they loved that answer. And they were like, that's this one. And so I jumped down that spinning vortex, and I seemed to come back into the earth plane of consciousness, I'll call it. But when I came back, I was coming back from the end of this life. And I didn't know that at the time. And it actually took me a long time to figure that out, that that's what that was. But I came back and I looked through what seemed to be a higher up window in a taller building in a city that was, I want to say, almost like utopia. It was very technologically advanced, but also good, because I know we have a lot of images in our head of technologically advanced bad futures. But this one wasn't. It was positive. Everything was clean and functional and seemed good. And I looked through this window high up, or like floating. I'm floating in the air. And I see this very old person, and they see me, and they go, and they're shocked. And I know they died after that, but I didn't actually see it. And I just kept going. And now I realize like that was me at the very end of this life. And I see myself. And that's when I think I will know that, oh, I'm dying right now. That's what I assume, because that's what it seems like to me. And that's what I've started to understand about that. At the time, it was just a weird experience. I was like, I don't know. I looked at an old person through a window in a weird city. That was what it was to me, right? And then as I'm coming back, I'm actually seeing all these scenes from my life from that point backwards. And I'm seeing even numbers. The latest number I saw was 2020 or 2021. I can never remember now. I have to go back to my journal. But one of those years, it was the latest number I actually saw. And I just saw scenes of my life going all the way back. And it was like I was moving through time to get to me in my bed, sleeping, and come back into my body as 13-year-old Lindsay. And I finally got back to that point, and I was getting closer and closer physically to my house the whole time. I was moving through the timeline and seeing the images, and I plopped into my body, and I woke up, and again I was just like, what just happened to me? Like, I don't think I could craft such a dream if I tried. I've had, again, a lifetime of super intense, really enigmatic, sometimes prophetic, sometimes dreams, but nothing like this. And so of course I wrote every single detail. I was a writer, I was a journaler, and again, I didn't really have the internet. I didn't have anything to go compare it to. I didn't really have people who really were that interested, because a lot of my friends were in deep trauma themselves. They were like trying to just get through the day, and, we were using drugs and whatnot. And so it just wasn't something I got to explore that much. But I'll add one more little detail to this. And this is that I went to the library. I've always been a big fan of the library. I'm a big reader, a big writer. I went to the library and I got a Nova episode. I want to say it was Nova. And it was something about space, because this experience, right, was just in my brain and I needed more and I wanted to understand. And so I was like, I don't know, I'll watch this random scientific video about space. And I brought it back and I put it in, and I started to see the images I had seen on that experience, and it just filled me, it overwhelmed me. It was the first moment I really realized that actually happened. That was not a dream. Like, the things that I'm seeing in this movie are exactly the same as the things I've seen in this experience. And I didn't know that ahead of time. So it was real. And as I'm realizing this and I'm overwhelmed by that this happened to me and that this was real, I literally, as I think this was real, this happened to me, like a spark of light floated in front of me in physical reality. It made a popping sound. I saw the light explode. It was like confirmation. It was like my soul was like, yes, get it through your thick skull. Like, this actually happened. Really big things happened to you. Very important things. And it took that to really like drive it home and to make me like experience and accept the experience and know what it was and really let it sink into my heart and soul. And so that was its own fascinating experience of just confirmation. And it actually scared me. It really scared me, because materialistically walking around in 3D reality, just lights don't just, or little sparks don't just explode in front of you. Like, that's not a thing that happens. So I actually got very scared, and I thought, well, what's actually going on, and what is reality, and who am I, and what's happening to me? And again, I had no one really to help me through that. So it was just actually pretty scary, pretty overwhelming, very beautiful, very enlightening, very like, again, cementing in my heart, like what I'm here for, who I am, what I'm supposed to do with my life, in many ways. And then also really scary, really hard to integrate into reality, and also somewhat depressing, because part of me again was struggling a lot in life. And that place out there, that center of all things, that ship, those people who brought me on the ship, like that was just good. I just, part of me like, can I just stay there? Why do I even have to jump down through the tornado tunnel into this life again? Like, isn't that better? So there's also some of that too. So a really overwhelming, intense experience.
Yeah. And when you describe, wanting to stay there and just having positive feelings, and it really reminds me of how people describe NDEs, that there's just like love and you're surrounded by so much love, like usually more than you've ever felt in a lifetime. And there's nothing bad, there's no fear, there's no negative feelings.
Yeah.
So I can understand why most people that have NDEs wouldn't want to come back if it were up to them.
Yeah, it took me, in fact, just the past handful of years before I've talked with a lot of NDE experiencers, and they are the ones who said to me, well, you've had a near-death experience. You don't call it that because you don't feel like you were dying, but you left your body and you had the full thing. And in fact, one of the people I've talked to had the exact same visual of the tornadoes and coming back into a specific timeline. And it was a different timeline than the one when he had left his body, or right when he had died. And so that was the first time I've ever heard anyone else have that exact same experience of choosing which life and which timeline, with the exact same visual as well with the tornadoes. So, I have a lot of near-death experience shared aspects, and I think that's fascinating too, to think about that we can have this near-death experience without our body going through the trauma of dying. Actually, like, we can do it in other ways.
Yeah, and I think that as well, to be honest, I think it's just a definition that we give, because right, I've heard, so I was talking to somebody and he mentioned from a very young age, sort of being able to get out of his body. And the more he focused on it, the more he could control it. Then he had a near death as well. But from all the experience that he's built up with that, like, it seems like something that he can control. So you're basically going into another dimension or having an otherworldly experience. And whether it is because there's a part of dying that's there, or because there's something that you can control and you will it into being. But I think it's, yeah, sometimes I have to say, since I'm in this space, I just think of things and think how much is it the definition that we want to give something? Like, is this an NDE? Is it not an NDE? And how much would it just be like, this is what it is, right? Traveling through another dimension. And probably the souls in other dimensions don't think, well, that was an NDE, but you had an out of body, and there we go.
Right. No, I'm exactly on that same page where I think language actually holds us back. And I'm an author and a reader and an English teacher. And so like I love words and I love language. And I always think about how poor they are at allowing us to discuss these things. We don't have the right words for it. You can't really express it. You can know it by doing it and you can be it, but it's so hard to communicate it actually. And then these labels, they can be helpful, right? Because people who have actually had the trauma of their body dying might want to connect with other people who have had the trauma of their body dying along with this experience, which might be a little bit different, right? Where I did not have that trauma of my body dying that I know of. But yeah, the labels sometimes also then just create these distinctions that we don't necessarily need. And it is, I think, helpful to notice that you can access all of these other dimensions and all these other layers of consciousness without dying. You can definitely do that. And a lot of people do. And I think that's helpful to know too. It's also, I think, varying shades of experiencing that happens to a lot of people. So people who haven't quite had the full, like out of body, going to the center of the universe, coming back through a tunnel, or any of those types of things, you might have still had moments where you just really understood what you are and you experienced a moment in like the different way and you had an awakening sort of level, or you had like the feeling and the presence of God come to you. These are profound too, and we don't give those as much attention because they don't have a good label, right? They don't have a good word that we can like pinpoint them and follow them and look at them and say that. But I think a lot of people can relate to those experiences too more often.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I wanted to ask you, because you've had this particular experience of, sort of coming back through this vortex and choosing a certain vortex. So you chose a certain life, whereas it sounds like there were multiple lives you could have chosen from. You
Yeah.
chose a certain one, and then you came back via this vortex, which again is something that I've heard often in this space. So there seems to be a connection there. And you've also come back through the end of your life. So you've seen scenes of your life that would have happened later, that probably still haven't happened yet. And I'm curious, with the knowledge and vocabulary that you have today, what was happening
In the world or in my life?
What was happening with you? So why were you going through that vortex? Why were you seeing those images of yourself?
I really feel like I was given that opportunity to choose because after that point in my life, I've actually had many, many close encounters with death where I probably should have died or easily could have died, and then I didn't. And I almost always didn't die for pretty miraculous reasons. So I feel like I literally chose that portal because it was one where I had the most time here in which to be this higher level of myself or bring this message in whatever way I can or help people to connect to that understanding of themselves, which I feel like is the mission, right? I want to help people to do all those things and to really live their, at the very least, live a life where they're aware that they are a soul. And at the very best, live in that empowered soul state where they feel like they are the creators of their own reality, right? And that they can thrive in that and that nothing can stop them from doing that. So I chose that funnel, I believe, for that reason. Like I said, I want to go to the life that's best for me and everyone else. Like this is a really good life for me. Who knows what those parameters are? Apparently one of them is longevity. So I live a long time, a lot longer. And also then I get to help more people and not just me, right? This is also therefore a timeline where a lot of people are helping a lot of people, where a lot of people are coming back online, let's say, or stepping up into their higher self or experiencing life in this higher way. And that's a great life to live as well. And it's, again, it's hard. There's difficulty. There's purification that's going on for everyone who's doing that. We're all shedding like the trauma and the loss and the grief and the stress and the anxiety of the world that was false that we had been creating before now, right? And that's hard. It hurts. And there's a lot of loss and grief involved in it. But I believe that we've chosen this together, that I'm not the only one who chose this life on purpose, right? And who chose this timeline on purpose. And so that also gives me a lot of hope. So I think that's part of why there's a big chunk of the timeline that I didn't get a single memory or vision or scene that I recall. And so I always said, like, before 2020, when I would tell this story, I'd say 2020 is when it's all up in the air for me. I don't know anything about it. Or 2021, if it was 2021. But then that year came and went, and I was like, wow, that was a huge shift for the world, right? Like, whatever good, bad, or neutral we think came from 2020 and 2021, it was big. So I almost wonder too if I purposely hid those scenes from myself, because there are a lot of times, I talk to my spiritual guides and allies a lot. I do it on behalf of other people, and there's questions I have for myself or other people are asking of me to ask them, and there is no answer. A lot of times there's an answer, and sometimes there's not. And sometimes it's the weirdest question where I'm like, really? We can't get an answer to that question? It seems so simple. But almost all the time when something like that is hidden, it's not hidden against our will. It's like some higher aspect of us was like, let's not actually look at that, because you wouldn't do it the same way if we told you, or you wouldn't do it at all if you knew how long it was going to take or how hard it might be, or maybe even something else. It's just so unexpected. Like we were saying earlier, the version of yourself you might see is just so different from what you expect that it would kind of be too jarring. There's all kinds of reasons why we might not know something. So I'm in a time right now where I have no idea. Back before then, I had a decent idea of some of the things that might happen to me, and I have no clue in that unknown period.
That's really exciting.
It's pretty exciting. It's open-ended. Yes.
Yeah.
And I still kind of know the end point, right? I'm in a pretty pleasant place at some point in the future, in the distant future, it seems, as I die, so I don't die in pain or squalor or terror. That's pretty hopeful.
But does it change? Did it change just knowing? Because I definitely want to get into how these experiences changed your life and the trajectory you were going on. But before we get into that, I really want to know, because a lot of us, I think, we wouldn't be able to handle it, right? If we knew we're going to die at that time, that age, that circumstance, like if we were almost given that image that you were given.
Yeah.
Like, how did that change things for you? And do you think it's better that you sort of know and you'll have a feeling when that moment comes, like, okay, we're nearing the end? Do you think it's better, or do you think it's worse that you know that?
I think it's better for me personally. And it's a great question, because I don't think it would be for everyone necessarily. But for me personally, it's better because that trust, that faith, where I'm like, oh, I mean, this is fine because I make it through this. Obviously, I've seen the very farthest point of this life. So this is okay. And I'm there intact, right? So I'm not going to lose a limb or any of those things either. And so this trust and this faith has allowed me a sort of level of surrender to the path of my life and the choices that I feel called to or guided to by my soul or by my spiritual guides or allies. And the surrender to that has created amazing things I wouldn't have done otherwise. I wouldn't have chosen otherwise. I wouldn't have had enough trust. I would have had more fear about life. And I think in general, out-of-body experiences have that effect, even if you didn't have that experience of seeing this later point in my life, right? I think a lot of people come back with that understanding of it honestly doesn't even matter. Right? Like, this physical body is very, very beautiful. It's very cool. It's the temple, right? It's good to take care of it, treat it well, and we enjoy it. And it's not us. And it never could be us. It's just a vessel, right? It's a tool. It's a beautiful tool we get to use. And so it doesn't actually matter what happens to it. So there's a bit of fearlessness in that. And it's not the same as not having a survival instinct, right? Like you're still going to be afraid. I always say if the bear's running at you, you're still going to be afraid. Even if you know you survive it, it's still going to cause adrenaline and all these things. You're still a human. But at a higher level, you just understand like it's okay. It doesn't matter, right? I'm free actually of this. I'm not attached to this, not at the highest level. In the moment, yes. In the fear moment, yes. In the adrenaline, yes. But at the highest level, I just know, and no one can take that from me. It can't change. Nothing could change my mind about it because I know it by having experienced it, that I'm something else, more pure, beyond this. That's my essence, and it can't be changed. It can't be destroyed. There's no danger at that level, right? So it's very freeing. It's very positive for me to have that understanding and that feeling. And I honestly wish I could give it to everyone. The world would change in an instant if everyone truly knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that they exist beyond their body and that their consciousness is what they actually are. Their soul is what they actually are. All of the earth would transform instantly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just since I've been in the NDE space and talked to a few NDEers, you know, the moment that I start going through life and even watching a movie or so, like it seems to me like we see death in this very like that's the worst thing that can happen to you. It's awful, it's bad, and you need to avoid it at all cost. And anything that would bring you closer to it is terrifying, and you should run away from it as fast as you could. And this changed, even though I haven't had similar experiences myself, but just hearing stories from NDEers, it just changed, you know, what I think about it. And then when you're conscious on that level, that it's actually just a separation and it's just a process you're going through, but it's not forever. Your soul lives on. It's just, you know, just like you have a car, but you are not your car. The car is a tool, and so is your body in this life.
Right.
It just seems like how much fear could we take away from everybody if this idea was just general knowledge, right? Like death is okay. Like after you're gone, like it's much better actually, and it is right here, right?
Yeah, you won't really want to come back. And you do actually. When your personality and your ego sort of simmers down, you can't wait to come back actually. This is a very, very beautiful experience we get to have here. But it makes life richer too, right? Like when you understand that death, it's not, it's just a transition that you go through. Like it's just like birth. You were born, it was kind of intense, it's kind of crazy. And death might be that way too. But it is just a change of form or shape, and your consciousness is continuous throughout all of these births and deaths that you're going to go through this experience. And it's very freeing, right? It's very freeing. You get to really take life and say, well, what do I want to do with this then? This time that I have here, what do I want it to be? And even that surprises me how few people really ask themselves that. I remember for a period of time shortly after these types of experiences, I was asking people like, what are we doing here? Like, I mean, like as humanity, like what are we doing? Do we have a goal? Do we have an intention? Do we have any sort of like what are you doing here? And people would be like, I don't know, I'm eating my lunch. And I'm like, no, but like what are you doing here? And people were just like, what is she talking about? She's weird because we're like 14 or whatever, you know, we're kids, and they're just like, this is a weird conversation. But I've continued to ask people from time to time as an adult, what are you doing here? And how few people have thought to themselves, like, I don't know, what am I doing? What do I want with life? Because death is a given, right? It's absolutely going to happen for you. As my grandma used to say, none of us are getting out of here alive. And it's true. It's fun. You just understand, like, this is absolutely going to happen to you. It's happened to countless people before you, countless more after you. It's just a thing that's going to happen. Just let it go. And then ask yourself, so what do I want to do with life? There's actually this Stoic concept, memento mori, and it means to keep death in mind, right? And it sounds really depressing to some people, but only if, like we were just talking about, you're looking from our societal view that death is this to be avoided, horrible, awful thing. But if instead you're looking at it as like, it's just an expiration point at some point of this current incarnation. So what do I want to do before then? What do I want to make of this life before then? And that's actually very beautiful and inspiring. It's hopeful, and it's not dark, and it's not depressing. It's kind of joyful. You realize every moment is a gift, and I get to do whatever I want with this. It doesn't mean I'm happy all of the time, although I think people think that because I'm often smiling and I do feel in general very happy. But the more we have that understanding, the more often we are thinking in that way of like, all right, what am I going to do with today? What am I going to do with this gift right now?
Are you able to, from that point of view, if you're, angry, depressed, stressed, because we all are, right, at times, we get upset, there's things annoying us, stressing us out. How do you get yourself back into that state of being grateful, understanding that you're here for a reason, that you chose this?
It's a great question. And I think people think I like don't have any of that because I don't commonly share. I mean, this is not what people want to interview me about, right? So I'm not always talking about it, but I have a lot of stress and challenges in my life, and I have health struggles, and I have, mental and emotional, just like everybody. And so it's a great question. And sometimes they're harder than others. I mean, if I'm in like a moment of physical pain or physical distress, that's maybe the hardest place to be conscious of the gratitude and conscious of your higher self and conscious of the love and all these things, because it's a very immediate sort of disconnecting situation. But in general, for any of these, like my go-to is to go outside and to get on the earth. And the earth has just this beautiful life force, this energy and this love. If you want to compare it to God, I think it's an apt comparison. If it's not just another version of God, I don't know what the earth is. And it's just ready to like let all of that leak out of you, just remove it from you. I mean, this is what grounding is. We're just literally like releasing all of this stuff that not really ours. It's built up over misconceptions and disconnections and the stress of this life, and so we can let it go down into the earth. And there's no magic recipe for this. I mean, you can do it any way you want. You can just know what's happening, or you can imagine something leaking out of you into it and visualize that, or you can just say, thank you, earth, for taking this from me and thank you for refilling me, right? Because this is the other half of grounding, is you're getting refilled with this beautiful energy. It's always fascinating to me that materialistically we can actually measure that as an electric charge, right? That it's this negative electric charge is leaving your body and it's being refilled with a more balanced, neutral, or positive electric charge. Is literally measurable. So it's actually happening. And as you're doing that, if you want to also, I think it's a beautiful thing, just like prayer, right? You can pray to a being that you love, Jesus or Muhammad or Vishnu or whatever, or you can pray to the earth, or you can just have a conversation. And I think it's so helpful because what you're actually doing is actually talking to those beings. Or you can talk to the higher level of yourself and be like, hey, this is really stressing me out. I'm really angry, or I'm really sad. And here's what's going on. And this is what I want, or why is it like this? And you may be shocked, if you are not a person who has done this often, that you actually will receive answers and solace and comfort because something is actually talking back to you. Somebody, someone, that being you're thinking of, they're giving you love and they're giving you messages and energy, even if it's on a subconscious level, you're receiving it. But oftentimes it will become conscious. You'll just suddenly solve the problem. What if I do this? Or you just feel better. So I think it's such a simple tool. I know a lot of people are like, I don't have natural spaces around me. But you do. Even in a city, going to stand on the sidewalk, you can ground. The concrete is still grounded. Right? You can still, there's trees, you can go hug one. I know you may look like, whatever, go sit it with your back against it. Like whatever it is you need to do, nature is around you. And so you can find it. It might not be the ideal picturesque place you'd love to be, but it's still just as good and beautiful. And so this is a powerful thing that anyone can do.
I love it. Grounding has definitely been on my list, and I'll say I'm not a big nature person, which sounds very fussy of me, I know. Because I always think, will something fall on me if I just, maybe a year ago or so, I could feel like not necessarily that I was fainting, but like at some point, it's a very weird feeling where I was sort of becoming aware that my body was like different and then sort of not. Yeah. So it was just like an instant thing, not necessarily like out of body or traveling, but a very momentarily different awareness of my body. And I have to say, one of the advices that I was given then was to ground, so that my soul can better align and my chakras can better align with my body,
Mm.
which I have not done. So I still
Well, I'll
have to
tell
do it.
you, you don't have to be barefoot, although I do think that's ideal. Like that is the best way to ground for sure. But you can throw a blanket out and lay on it, and you're still grounding. You're still in the hug, the embrace of the earth. You're still letting the electrons go down into the earth, and receiving the positive ones back. So don't feel put off if you have to do it in your way. That's beautiful. I mean, even if you were to have like a somehow, I don't know, lead or like blocking blanket that you were sitting on, it would still be positive to be out in the air and the sun.
Yeah.
Right? You're still connecting with these other aspects of life. And I mean, we are nature. So the more we're in nature, there's so many aspects of it that are healing. Even the, plants and things tend to be fractal looking. Our brain loves that. Our brain is like, oh, fractals. Look at this plant. We love this. This is beautiful. So even those types of aspects are really positive too. So don't let it stop you. I'm really turned off by bugs. So I have to go out and, make sure that I'm protected in whatever ways I want from those types of things. But I think we can all find our way that works for us.
For sure. Yeah, I'll definitely give this a go. And to sort of redeem myself, I have to say, since the pandemic, I have this little lake that's close by to my house, and I've started taking a walk. It's about 8 kilometers, so I'm not quite sure. Maybe it would be 5 miles in
Sounds right.
US metric system,
Yeah.
I reckon. But yeah, it's just like a beautiful lake, and going around it, and there's nature around it, almost seems like a forest. And the more I've done it every day, when everything was uncertain, when I felt like my mental health was really something I need to get under control, everything was changing. But it was so good doing that. And I've kept that habit since, because I feel like it does wonders for my mental health. Yeah. So whenever I know that somebody struggles with that, I say, well, just go for a walk. And even if you don't have, a park close by, just do it around the blocks, I guess. But if you can have some water or some trees in the area, that would be amazing.
Yeah. I mean, their consciousness is helping you. That's all they live to serve, right? That lake has its own consciousness, and the river has its own consciousness, and each tree has its own consciousness. And so you're surrounded by friends, really. and they're more psychic than human. They're not more psychic than humans, but they are more in touch with that aspect of themselves. So they're holding you too, whether you want it or not, or know it or not. They're like, oh, I love you, friend. Sorry you're sad. You're like, oh, you feel this in your heart if you really get in touch with it. So it's there's so many reasons to go be in nature.
So is this really happening, that, there's this calmness that's supporting us and sort of healing us or calming us down when we're more in touch with green spaces, nature,
Yeah.
etc.?
Well, I'll say this, yes, that each of these things has its own consciousness. And again, they're loving, they're in infinite service. This is one of the beautiful aspects of nature, is that's what it does. It just is in service of all of life. It's just an infinite support, no judgment, very beautiful. But also when you're in those states and in those places, you are getting a deeper connection with yourself. And that's actually the really healing part. And in our heart chakra is the place where we are, I'm going to say, quantumly entangled with every other consciousness, so including God, including heaven, including source, whatever you want to call it. Right here in your heart, you carry that around with you. And that level of consciousness to get in touch with, no matter how you experience it, no matter what method you use to do it, whether it's just walking and thinking about the fact that your heart is this beautiful source of love and light in the universe, or that it is connected to the love and the light in the universe, or you have a specific breathing method, or you have a specific visualization, it's all good. You don't have to go to that. You can just be there and just know that. That is what's so healing and so transforming, more than any of those other things. So all those other things are sort of calling you back to that connection. All the trees are like, hey, you're loved. Hey, we love you. And the earth is like, hey, you're loved. Hey, we love you. Hey, all of the lake, all of the air, all the sun, all the everything's like, hey, you're loved. By the way, did you remember you're loved? And so the more you're letting that in and remembering that and allowing that, that's the healing. The more recently, so within the past, maybe literally just a year or so, I went into sort of shamanic space, deeper meditation, sort of trance state, or whatever people want to call that. And I asked to be brought back to the center of all things. I was in a sort of like darker time. I was a little bit, feeling some hopelessness or some sadness or some grief, and I was like, can you just take me back? Like, I just want to like reconnect with this energy. And my spiritual guides and allies, they were like, yeah, we can. And they're so cheeky. So they're mischievous. Like, of course we can. And then they literally brought my consciousness just down into my heart. And actually, this was this profound experience all over again, because I realized that is the center of all things. This heart chakra is absolutely exactly the same as the place that I went all the way out through the ship, all the way out in the universe, and saw as the center of all things. That is the heart of God, and this is my heart, and they're not different, and they're in the same place. They were like, because I was like, you kind of cheated. You just took me here. This is a smaller center of all things. And they were like, no, it's the same center of all things. And I was like, I mean, it blew my mind. And it makes so much sense. And I was like, of course it is. Of course I know that. Of course that's true. How would I not know that before this moment? But also, what a beautiful understanding to have been given. And what a very cheeky way to show me this profound truth. So you're really connecting with that. That is the beauty, and that's the healing.
I love that. And Lindsay, we've gotten a bit sidetracked, I think, but it was definitely worthwhile. I wanted to understand more of how these experiences have shaped the path that your life has been on.
Yeah, it's also a great question. I definitely, at the beginning, I think just learned or was called to, I'll say, live more authentically, and also to just make choices that were more aligned with my higher self. And again, I was in a lot of darkness. I was surrounded by a lot of darkness, a lot of dark people, a lot of dark activities. But it helped me to always be really clear about, oh, I'm not dark, actually. And so I won't go that way. And so even though I didn't instantly stop all of my negative behaviors and all of my suffering, I more and more chose over and over again the light or the good or the honest or the happy, or right, all of these different things. And so over time, the change, who knows, can we even quantify like where I would have been otherwise if I didn't have that light beating in my heart calling me to, this more authentic, more aligned place. And I always, even before these experiences, had a deep desire to help people and a deep love for people. So I was always, I think, heading towards sort of helping positions like teaching, and that's where I ended up going towards. And but the way I did it also changed, because my goal was not then just to sort of help in general or just be there to like, here's some pencils and here's some knowledge about English or whatever it is, but also to reach a soul and just to, however I can, remind people of their value and remind them that they're loved and remind them that they are able to choose also the light, no matter how dark they feel like they've gone. And I think that's been part of my mission, I guess, is to especially reach out to people who feel like, oh, not me. Oh, I'm too dark, or I've done too much wrong, or I've done too much bad, or I've suffered too much, or especially those people, because I've been there. I relate to that. So the type of help, the quality of help that I wanted to then provide for people, I think was also very obviously changed by this understanding of who I am and what I am and what we're here for and what we're doing here. And then, over time, more and more, I've had more and more experiences where I was very clearly called to help people on a spiritual level and to share spiritual truth with them, to testify, as some might call it, right? And to definitely share deeper aspects of my story so that they could see themselves in it, and to offer people this connection to that center, right? To the center of all things, to God, to source, in whatever ways I can. And that has sort of changed over time, but it always has had a sort of shamanic bent to it. I've had a lot of shamanic teachers over the years accidentally, and I also have some native heritage, and so that I'm sure has helped informed that, you know, that's epigenetically like within me. So it's an easier route maybe for me to take. I was called to do tarot for people, and so I've been doing tarot for many, many years. And now more recently, I do deeper levels of ceremony. I do more direct channeling of my spiritual guides and things that they want to share. And then I work with people to connect with their spiritual guides and allies, bring through healing energy and also these messages from their spiritual guides and allies. And that really has been one of the most beautiful experiences I've been grateful to experience here on earth. You know, teaching was its own very beautiful connection with people and calling people back to their own heart and keeping that fire alive in what I think is a very dark system, actually, of education. But this is a different level of support for people, and it's being able to see how people's lives change because of it is very humbling and very gratifying.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so beautiful. And it almost seems like you were set out right on this path, like through your experiences, and they almost happened for you to realize this purpose and the gifts that you have to share with the world.
Yeah, I really, and that's part of it looking back, because some of my experiences were not nearly as positive as the traveling to the center of the universe. And so again, I'd say, well, like, why do I have to deal with this? And it was always like, well, now you have the tools to deal with it. And not everyone does, right? And I'm sort of mentally called to the path of this sort of spiritual warrior, you know, where when people are in the thick of the darkness, I can just be right there with them and help them get back out of it. And so a lot of my struggles were literally creating that ability in me. And I look back and I see that. I see this as just a path of steps that I was led along and taken to be exactly right here, right now, doing this work with people. And I couldn't have done this work if I didn't go through all of those things. That was life and my soul training me to do this work. I don't really have a lot of other training directly in what I'm doing except these experiences and the guidance I receive. And so, yeah, I know that this is what I came here to do.
Amazing. Because we've spoken about your work, how can people connect with you and with your work?
The best way is probably to go to rogueways.org. I always say it's rogue ways as in pathways, not waves as in ocean waves. So rogueways.org is the best place. You have my books there. There's some that are source channeled inspirational messages. They're really beautiful for people to use either as sort of bibliomancy, like divination, like open to a page and get your message for the day or for the moment or the answer to the question that you've been asking yourself or the universe, but also just to read, as especially the key of transformational healing is almost like a guidebook of understanding ourselves on a deeper level. So that and my fictional novels that are also channeled are also there on the site at rogueways.org. And people can work with me one-on-one if you'd like to. There's a lot of different options. Again, I do tarot. I do spiritual guidance sessions where we connect with the guides and allies. And I do sound healing and some other things. So there's lots of opportunities for people if they want to reach out and connect in that way. Or they can just say hello, make an email, and just drop a line, drop a question, or whatever they'd like to do. And there's also a shop there where people can get the orgone that I create, which is another thing I was guided to do and create. And I didn't really want to, but they were very insistent that I do it. So I've got some orgone on the site as well for people who want to uplift their space or bring more energy into their intentions and manifestations, or just have a really good spiritual field in the place that they're at. So rogueways.org is the place to go and be. And you can also connect with my show there and just find out all the things I do. I hope to connect with all of you guys out there. And remember that you are deeply loved. You are love and you are loved.